Okay, you're welcome to the Building a System of Play webinar. Just a couple of items to draw your attention to that's on the screen. Just make sure your camera and microphone are turned off. It'll be just easier on the session where you'll be able to hear there'll be no noise in the background, and it'll be much easier to communicate with you on the webinar itself. For your information too, we'll also record this webinar, and we'll share it along with a few different items there tomorrow concerning the Building a Systems of Play. Just for your information, that I'll be coordinating the chat tonight and the presentation. I'll be assisting Paul and providing the feedback to your answers. So there will be a few tasks that Paul will be doing. So if you can have a pen and paper ready, just to answer a few simple tasks that Paul will provide during the presentation, and you can feed your answers through the chat box there, and I can feed them back directly to Paul, because Paul can't see the screen because he has it on full screen for his presentation. So that's my role tonight, to mediate between Paul, yourselves, and the presentation. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Paul. Paul, are you tuned in? Yeah, there's 39 in the presentation there at the moment, Paul.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me, Hugh?
Yeah, Paul.
Good evening, everyone, and hopefully everyone is doing well. Tonight we're going to look at systems of play and how to choose, develop, and coach your team. Now, systems of play is a very broad topic, and we probably could have a number of webinars on it, but tonight we're just going to focus on building and developing a system and what's involved in that. So probably for me as a coach, previously, a couple of years ago, probably wouldn't have focused a lot on systems and stuff like that, and probably would have spent January, February, March probably doing a lot of pre-season stuff and physical stuff, and probably didn't look at this at all. And then then would be expecting my players to be, have a system perfected for championship in June or July. So now as a coach, I would use this. I would work a lot on systems, and I would spend a lot of time with players, and a lot of the sessions I would do all year round would consist of working on stuff for systems of play. Just to give you a small background to the webinar and how it was put together. So myself and Colin Begley from Laois, there's a county player from Laois, would have put this together for Leinster GA last year. And, myself and Colin would have been to a number of workshops on systems of play, and very good workshops, and an awful lot of them would have focused on different types of systems, and, would have went out on the pitch and focused on one system against another. And, while that's very important, we felt like that we should really kind of focus our workshop on going back to the basics as regards, you as a coach thinking about why you would put a system in place with your team, and if it wasn't working, how you would fix that, or if it was working, how you'd make it better. So that's kind of the background in relation to that. The workshop was originally rolled out this year with 45 minutes of the session focusing on the theory element, and that was to be done inside. So obviously we can't get outside. It was a 60-minute practical session in addition to that. Now I've included the activities, some of the activities that we would have been doing outside if this had been outside, but most of it tonight will be obviously theory. In relation to putting the material together for the workshop, we decided to look at how you as a coach would select a system, what components are involved, and how you develop the system on the training pitch. During tonight's webinar, we also have a number of tasks. So I'd encourage you to use the chat box to answer any of the questions that we have included in the presentation. If you have any questions as we go along, or anything at the end, we'll go through towards the end of the presentation, and you can relay back to me. So the outcomes of the webinar. So by the end of the session, you will be able to define what a system of play is, understand components to be considered before choosing a system of play. So what you need to understand before you choose a system of play with your team. Apply a general template and process to develop a system of play of your choice or choosing, and implement the Torres principles when coaching issues in a system of play. And the Torres principles are really focused on the how to coach. So a lot of coaches nowadays, they have loads and loads of resources. There's loads of resources out there. But the big one for me, and especially with systems of play, is how you coach it, how you get that message across to the players that they're able to do it on the pitch when it matters. So just to give you the breakdown of what we're going to look at. So the first thing we're going to look at is define a system of play. We're going to look at a few examples of systems of play, components of a system of play, choosing a system of play, developing a system of play, and then break down and coaching of systems of play. Okay. Now, some of that, as I said, relates to the outdoor activity, but I have the drills included, and we'll go through them at the end. So hopefully, when we get back out in the pitch, you'll have a fair understanding of the activities. Okay. So to get started, the first thing I'd like you to do, and you can use the chat box for this, okay? And even think of your own team here as a coach, okay? Or even maybe something that you would have seen as a coach. So what is a system of play? So what do you understand by a system of play? And maybe give an example of one you may have used as a coach, okay? So I'll give you a minute there to put that into the chat box. So what do you understand? What does a system of play mean to you? And give an example of one you may have used as a coach. So that could be a defensive one, it could be an attack one, whatever you used as a coach, maybe with your team, or maybe you would have seen an inter-county team using on television or in an inter-county match during the year, okay? So we'll just give them a minute there, Hugh, in relation to that. So what is a system of play? And give an example of one you may have used as a coach.
There's one, they're coming in there now, Paul. One of the systems would be an extra man back with number 15 playing as a sweeper.
Yeah, excellent.
A sweeper in front of the back line is the second one.
Yeah. There's two examples of defence.
You can just imagine, Paul, if the Sunday game was on Sunday night and you were looking at a Leinster Championship match or a National League match, and you were observing even from your home sitting room, and you were looking at how Dublin or Kerry set up, what would you see? So that would be basically what you'd see. It'd be what the system to be using, like.
Yeah.
Wing forward, supporting the defence.
Yeah, excellent.
Playing with a third midfielder.
Yeah.
And the half forward dropping back on turnovers.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so we've got a lot of defensive systems coming in there in relation to your feedback there. So we'll move on to this. Okay, so just to give you a definition of it, okay? So what is a system of play? So it's basically the organisation and deployment of players on the field of play with which the team tries to implement and impose their match strategy. So it's a collection of recognisable patterns of play set out with a desired performance outcome resulting from the use of certain players in fairly clearly defined functions on the field. Now, we would have run this workshop in a couple of counties and for Europe GAA last week, and a lot of the words that are highlighted in yellow have come up from the feedback from coaches. So organisation, big word, deployment of players, implement and imposing their match strategy, recognisable patterns of play. Okay, so there's patterns of play. And then I suppose a really, really important one for me, players in fairly clearly defined functions on the field, so that players know their roles and they know their functions on the field. Okay, so that's just a definition of a system of play, and I think it explains it. The words highlighted explain it really well. Organisation, deployment, implement, match strategy, patterns of play, and players in fairly clearly defined functions on the field. Now, these are some examples of systems of play, okay? And you're after coming up with some, and there's loads more, okay? And there's some systems of play that haven't even been designed yet, okay? Coaches will be working on systems of play in years to come, and these are just some of the ones that I have seen and I have used a lot, okay? And these are my understandings of these, okay? So in relation to sweeper, okay, that was mentioned, okay. My view of a sweeper is one player coming back, okay, to help. So if that was the 15 or the 12 or the 11 or so forth, okay, to come back, okay. A double sweeper then would be the 2 players coming back, okay. So two extra players coming back from either 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 or 15, okay. My understanding of a blanket defense is when 3 or more players come back, okay. So if it's 3 coming back or 6 coming back or 8 coming back, I would view that as a blanket defence to help the 6 backs that are there in position already. Okay, tandem defence. So tandem defence would be, and the word tandem would have came from basketball. So and you'd see that a lot in basketball. So tandem defence will be where a 12 or a 10 would drop to the 5 or 7 position or the 6 position, and maybe 5, 6 or 7 would drop off as a sweeper, okay? So you're moving from a forward position, taking up the position of the 5, 6 or 7, and the 5, 6 or 7 or the 3 of them, if the 3 players came back, would take up a role as an extra defender, okay? So that's your tandem defense, okay? And as I said, it's a basketball term and used a lot in basketball. So there are 3 examples of defensive systems, okay? T formation, okay? A T formation will be an attack system. So that can be done 2 ways, okay? That can be set up with a T with 3 players, 3 forwards across the half forward line and 1 forward in the full forward line, like a T shape, okay? Or you can turn that on its head and you can have 3 in the full forward line and 1 on the half forward line, okay? Which will still give you a T, but obviously the other way around, okay? So that's an attack system, okay? T formation, okay? Spine system would be where you would have 3 or 4 or 5 players in a spine position, maybe from the 14 out to the 45. So it would have been literally in a line where they would leave space left and right for the players to run into. Okay, so that's used. I've seen a number of teams using that. Okay, so that maybe a team is playing extra bodies back, and it leaves a lot of space left and right for the forwards to run into. Okay, so that's your spine system. So that's another attack system. Twin towers, we're all familiar with that, and obviously the likes of Kieran Donaghy a couple of years ago, or if you have two players that are fairly tall, you can put them in on the edge of the square, and we can kick in a lot of high ball in them. So if you have 2 players like that, that's obviously a good system to play from an attack point of view. A traditional man-on-man is a system that wasn't mentioned. Some coaches mightn't view that as a system, but it is a system. Okay, 15 going out and 15. We're pushing high on the kick out. Our 6 backs or our 6 forwards are marking the 6 backs for the kick out, and they're pushing high on that, and they're responsible for their player if they get it. Okay, as is any other player, to stop the pass. The middle third one is a new one, and I would have seen this a lot last year with Dublin ladies football team, and I think it's one that will come in to the game, as the years go on, or even this year. Okay, and it's kind of 3 areas, within the 2 14-meter lines. Okay, so a coach would select three middle areas from one 14-meter line to the other, and the team would collectively defend in them 3 areas and attack in the 3 areas. And I think the good thing about that is if you turn the ball over in defence, you have a lot of forwards in the middle third because they're after working back there as regards defending. So the middle third one, it's dependent as regards where the coach wants the players to defend. But all them players work a lot in them 3 third areas in the middle of the pitch between the 2 14s. So they're just some examples of systems of play, okay? And it's up to you as regards to what system you come up with. These are some ideas. Some of them might suit your team, some might not, okay? But I think what we're going to go through tonight is the process of putting that together and why you would select any of them systems, or what systems that you want to design yourself. So the next task, what I'd like the coaches to do is, what key components do we need to understand when understanding and implementing a system of play? So what key components do we need to consider when understanding and implementing a system of play? So if you're gonna put in a certain system of play with your team, what what components do you need to consider? Okay, because we see, like, you know, over the years, I would have seen a lot of coaches watching teams playing and say, right, we're going to go back and we're going to play like that team. Okay, without even actually thinking, you know, what we need to understand here, what we need to consider before we put that in with our team. Okay, so obviously, if you're going to play a running game and you're not fit, you know, that's not running for a system of play. Okay, so what I'd like you to do in the chat box is there, what key components do we need to consider when understanding and implementing a system of play? So what do you need to consider? So just give you a minute of that, please.
Yeah, well, they're coming through there at the moment, Paul, so we kick on. Naturally, the ability of your players to perform in the system would be one.
Yeah.
The player's strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
The attributes of the players themselves, the strengths and weakness of the players, the fitness of the players, what system the other team will play to counteract your system, the strengths of the players involved, the communications that's involved to make sure the system is implemented and working properly, and the individual players' abilities to cope within that system of play, and the club's tradition throughout the process and on their game style. And naturally, the right message from the coach to implement the system play.
Excellent. Yeah. Some really, really good answers there. And, you know, one that jumped out there, and, you know, I've done a few of these workshops and it hasn't come up, but communication there, somebody mentioned. The communication ability of your players is huge. And we look at that here now. So some really good answers there. So components of a system play. So what key components do we need to consider when understanding and implementing system play? And there's some really, really good answers came out. And these are just some I would have put up based on the workshops that we've done already. Okay, so stakeholders. Okay, so who are the stakeholders? The players. Okay, so the players are huge in relation to consider, you know, when you're putting a system of play with your team, because ultimately when they cross the white line, they need to know how to implement that system of play. Okay, you shouting on the sideline for a system of play is not going to work. Okay, because there's just too many players that have too many roles, and it's not going to work for you. Okay, so the players have to have a big involvement in it, and we look at that a little bit later on. But the players have to have a major input. The coaches as well, in relation to, you know, does your coaches have the ability to implement the system of play that you want to implement with your team? You know, and if they can, yeah, go ahead with that. If they can't, you might have to adapt it. And then the manager, okay, as regards that he's getting his message across in relation to the coaches know their role, how to coach it, the players know their role, how to do it on the pitch. Okay, so the strengths and weaknesses of them. Okay, you spoke of the key skills there. Okay, so the key skills, you know, we'll come back to the players. Okay, in relation to their technical ability, their tactical ability, okay, so their decision-making ability, their team play ability, their physical ability, okay, so how, you know, how fit are this team, okay, how strong are the team to how aerobically fit, how quick they are. So that would have a big bearing in relation to what system you would put in. And obviously what one of the coaches have put up in the chat, the communication skills, okay, so no point in you putting a really, really advanced system of play with your team if the communication skills are poor. Okay, and if you are, you need to really, really work on them. Okay, the target outcomes. Okay, so the target outcomes would be, you know, in relation to statistics and stats coming from your stats people. Okay, so, you know, if just for example, if you were playing a very, very defensive game and, you know, your stats man is coming in at halftime saying or before the match saying we want, you know, 23 scored opportunities in the first half, and your team is going out with a really, really defensive system, that's not a realistic targeting outcome for that team. Okay, so that needs to link into your thinking as regards what your system of play is. And, you know, if you are playing a defensive game and you have two forwards up front, you know, give them a realistic target from the stats man, instead of coming up with mad stuff in relation to 23 scoring opportunities, you know, that you wouldn't be asking maybe 4 or 5 forwards to try and get. Okay, so that's important target outcomes. Tactics really important as well. And, you know, the three after in the brackets there, opposition, very, very, very important. Okay, and, you know, you can focus a lot in relation to, you know, what the opposition does or is going to do, or you can target the likes of weaker players on the opposition. And last year, I would have been asked by a team to come in and help in relation to a game. And, you know, the management team of the team that asked me in would have studied the opposition in great detail. And they identified that, you know, two of the best forwards at that level in the country was playing with that team. So based on that, they decided to play a sweeper system with one player sitting back full time to combat the threat, obviously, the two attacking players. So going with that system left them with a problem at the other end of the pitch with a 5 forward v6 defender situation. So in general play, you know, they couldn't control who the opposition freed up from the kickouts, but they could set up a defensive system by coming up with a plan to keep our sweeper in place and have a chance of turning them over coming out with the ball. So our plan was to identify their weakest player, who was their number 2, leave that player free for kickouts and tempt the keeper to kick the ball to that player while still having our full-time sweeper in place. So the instructions for the rest of the forwards then was to pick up the players, their own players, and we'd pick up that number 2 when that player entered our half with the ball. So what happened in the game? So there was 13 opposition kickouts in the first half. The cornerback got 7 of them, okay? 3 of them he passed, 2 of them he kicked over the sideline, and 2 of them he got turned over, okay? But he got turned over inside our 45 up along the sideline, okay? The good news, he was taken off at halftime, okay? The bad news is we lost the match, okay? There was many reasons why we lost the match, but that was one of the reasons, okay? So of the 4 balls he lost, we got 1 score off it, okay? So he lost most of the balls up along the sideline in our half, okay? So inside our 45, okay? So in hindsight, we'd half the plan right, okay, as we identified the right player, but we didn't select the right area to make contact with him, okay? So what we should have done, and we did in the second half, but we should have made contact with that player inside the half, okay? So we let that player come into our own half, and most of the time when he lost the ball, he lost it in areas that were really, really no benefit to us, okay? So when you're thinking about opposition, you really need to focus on, the weaker players, but also focus on the areas where you're going to try and turn them over, okay? Conditions would be obviously weather, things like that in relation to, you know, if you're going out with a defensive game and you have a gale force wind with you, can you adapt your system, okay? Or are you going to still play with X amount of players behind the ball, even though you have a gale force wind? You know, you look at Jimmy McGuinness a couple of years ago, they played Dublin, they were beaten in an Ireland semi-final, and he didn't change his system. He kept the system the same way. But the following year, he added much more attack system to the defence system, and obviously the rest is history, went on and won in Ireland, okay? So the conditions are important. That can you adapt your system when there's conditions, especially weather elements, okay? Situations then, obviously, if you go down a man or there's a man sent on or you get an extra man, if you're losing in a match, okay, again, if you're losing in a match by 4 or 5 points with 5 minutes to go and you're kind of playing a defensive system, can you adapt that to that situation, okay? Because you're not going to win a game continuing to play at that system and you're losing the game, okay? So can you adapt it in the situation, okay? Defense attack system connect. So what that means is when you're selecting a system, you need to link your attack system to your defense system and vice versa, okay? So there needs to be a connection to that. And I'll show you a couple of screenshots after of that, okay? But there's no point in coming up with it, you know, getting 13 players to go behind the ball and then expecting 4 forwards to be up inside, you know, the opposition's 45 when you turn the ball over. That's not going to happen. So you must connect the two, the defense and the attack system, okay? And then we've got the phases of games. So the example, transition, attack to defense, with or without possession. So I call these sub phases, okay? These are not systems of play, but they are hugely important within systems of play. So when you have the ball and when you don't have the ball, okay? And I just have an example here, a nice screenshot of, okay, that I put up in the dressing room a lot, you know, with some of the teams I work with in relation to transition, the 2 transition phases. So you've got 2 transition phases here. You transition from defense to attack. So the moment a team wins the ball from their opponents, we enter the transition from defense to attack. So that's always called positive transition, okay? And we'd spend, like, the game is made up of hundreds of these moments, okay? So the moment a team wins the ball, we enter the transition from defense to attack, okay? And then the other one, obviously, the flip of the coin then is the transition from attack to offense. So the moment a team loses the ball to their opponents, we enter the transition from attack to defense. So that's called negative transition. Okay. So if we lose the ball from a kick out, goalkeeper kicks it to number 2, we are now in negative transition. Okay. So what's our defensive system, or what's our setup then from there? Okay. Likewise, if we turn the ball over inside our D, what's our positive transition? What way are we set up front at that stage? Okay, so I think that's a nice visual, okay, in relation to transition to defense, win the ball, transition to attack, lose the ball, transition to defense. Okay. Okay, so next one we're going to look at is choosing a system play. Okay, and there's 2 ways you can do this. Okay, and there's no wrong way. Okay, so do you build your players around a system, or a system around your players? Okay, so which do you do? Myself personally, I always try to work a system around the players that I have. Okay, but there's nothing wrong with selecting a system and building your players around that. But to do that, you must do a SWOT analysis. Okay, so you must look at the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats. Okay, and just to give you a very simple example of that. Okay, so just for example, if we're going to pick the system, so we have a system, we're going to build our players around that. We have to do a SWOT analysis on that. Okay, so just for example, we just pick a simple system like sweeper. Okay, so what's the strengths of a sweeper system? Okay, you have extra cover at the back. Okay, that could be a strength of it. Okay, what's the weaknesses of it? It's probably going to leave you in a 5v6 situation in general, and it's going to leave you in a 5v6 on the opposition kickouts. Okay, what's the opportunities playing a sweeper? Okay, we're going to have extra cover at the back, and we're going to probably have an extra player for our kickouts. Okay, what's the threats to that system? Okay, so what if a team puts an extra player up on our sweeper? Okay, you might say that mightn't happen, but I've seen it happen in loads of matches. Okay, where 15 is dropped back, and the next minute 5 ends up in the sweeper as an extra forward for that team. Okay, so that's a threat to that. Okay, so whatever system you're building your players around, you need to do a SWOT analysis on that system. What's the strengths of it? What's the weaknesses of it? What's the opportunities within it? And what's the threats to it? Okay, and that's really, really important. Now, if you go on the other one, okay, as regards, and I particularly would work on this one, a lot as regards working a system around the players that I have. So this time you would do a SWOT analysis on your players to select a system. Okay, so this, based on your SWOT analysis of the players that you have, you should be able to come up with a system. So what's the strengths? So I'll just give you an example of a team, just a team might have worked in the last 2 or 3 years. So, the strengths of them, good aerobic team, good at hand passing the ball through the hands. Okay, so that could be a strength. Okay, what's the weaknesses of that team? So they're poor high fielders and they're poor kick passers of the ball. Okay, so I'm collecting all this information based on the strengths and weaknesses. So weaknesses, poor high fielders, poor kickers. Strengths, good aerobic team, good at hand passing the ball through the hand. So what's the opportunities within that? Okay, so the opportunities based on the strengths and weaknesses there would be to play a running game or play a running game through their hands. Okay, what's the threats to that? The threats would, do I have a panel to play a game like that? Because if I'm going to play a running game, it's going to like, I'm going to have to question the physical capacity of my panel, because you'll be taking lads off or ladies off after 43 or 44 minutes if you're playing something like that game. So do I have a team to deal with that? And if we meet a blanket defense, can I turn the ball over quick enough? Okay, so that would be threats as regards to the system, or to the system that I would be going to pick with based on the player's ability. Okay, so in relation to what system you're playing, you are choosing a system, build your players around that system, or a system around your players. But whichever way you decide to do that, you must do a SWOT analysis of it. Okay. Developing a system in place. So what we're going to look at here now is, how do you apply a system to your team? How do we properly develop a system of play, and a sample system of play run through process and activity? Okay, so the activities, as I said, would have been some of the activities we would have been doing out in the pitch, but we have them included here at the end. Okay, so process of developing a system of play. Okay, so when we're developing a system of play, we need to follow this process, okay? So inputs, okay, and we spoke about that. So we need the inputs from the manager, okay? So what system of play the manager wants to play, okay? Inputs from the coaches. So, you know, in relation to question the manager about it, question what they have to do on the training pitch, and then obviously the players. And I would involve the players hugely in relation to selecting systems, okay? Give them ownership of the system, okay? Like if you go in and say, right, we're going to play a blanket defense and don't ask any of the players, you know, you're going to get negative from the players straight away. So ask the players, what do they think might work for this team? Involve them in it. Okay, make sure they know in relation to the system that you want to play. Guide them in that direction. Okay, processes. Okay, so systems. So we spoke about the attack system, the defense system, how they connect. Okay, the roles, that everybody knows their roles. Okay, so every single player knows their role on the pitch. And I would even go a little step further on that they know the role of everybody else. Okay, because communication, you know, comes into systems of play hugely. And if I'm a corner forward and I'm telling the number 10 or number 12 to drop back into a position, you know, I need to know what his role is. Okay, before I'm just shouting at him, you know, not knowing what his role is. Okay. So roles are hugely important, that everybody knows the roles within the system. And then obviously your coaching. Okay, so your coaching is involved hugely in the process, and how you coach the players, how you question them, how you challenge them, okay, how you involve them in that system, okay. And then obviously you have your outcomes all the time. So your outcomes are, you know, when you're practicing your system, when it's taking place, or obviously then in the matches, okay. So it's constant training and constantly in the matches on your outcomes. Okay, so what I have here is, okay, and there's just a couple of screenshots of different systems of play and different ways of looking from an attack and a defense point of view, and, you know, from trying to get a team to help you set up your system. But basically what I wanted to show here was just how you can see here in the picture how well this is coached, how everyone knows their roles. Okay, and really good examples of systems and how they're linked together. Okay, so this is from a couple of years ago, a Dublin Senior Football Championship match between St. Vincent's and Ballymun. Okay, and on that day, Ballymun were playing a defensive system of 12 players. You know, when they lost the ball, they had 12 trying to get inside the 45. So you can see the 12 stars there are the Ballymun players on the pitch there, okay? So that was their blanket defence. When they lost the ball, let's get 12 players back into this position. So you can see there that they're in really good position. So they have pressure on the ball outside. So you can see Connolly is just about to kick the ball. He actually got blocked in that video clip. And then you've also got nice compact, so you can see where they're all marking, or either marking a player or nice and compact in front of the goals, and they're all, you know, the 12 of them are very close to either inside the 45 or very close to that. Okay, so when the coach was talking to that Ballymun team, he was obviously, you know, would have to explain a blanket defense. Okay, so like if you look at this here, he would be explaining like what a blanket defense function is. So a blanket defense function, in my opinion, is to protect the area closest to the goals, which they're doing there. Okay, so that's the area where the teams make the highest percentage of their shots. The blanket defense system tries to force the opposition into taking lower percentage shots from further away from the goals. So the crucial part of any zone defense is that players have designated roles and cover specific areas of the pitch, as opposed to marking man for man and allowing themselves to get pulled out of position. So you can see they're not getting pulled out of position at all. They're nice and compact. They're defending the danger area and the pressure out the pitch. So to be effective as well, it requires huge communication to both put pressure on the ball out top, as well as clogging the area in front of the goals. Okay. So
yeah, Paul, just come in on that there as well. There, just looking at that from a screen point of view, it's about kind of buying into the system and the concept of where they should be positioned. They're looking around, covering the angles, and every player is really understanding their role, even though the ball could be the opposite side of the field. Players know they still have a job to do if the ball is the other side of the field or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Sacrificing their own game.
Yeah, like it's a more collective effort, and it's really well coached here. And you know, I like the 2 or 3 players on Diarmuid Connolly. Like they've recognised that Connolly is obviously one of the best forwards in the country, and they're putting pressure. Like if you don't put pressure on Diarmuid Connolly there, if you took them 3 players out of there too, he'll go over that 45-metre line, and that's over the bar. Okay, so a lot of teams when they set up blanket defences, they don't put pressure on the ball at a certain point. So that's really, really important. And I'd also like you to look at St. Vincent's as well in this, okay? And St. Vincent's from an attack point of view are fairly well set up as well, okay? So if you see the player closest to the goal, they're keeping their depth. If you see the 2 players out right, you know, and even the player here to the left, they're keeping their width. They're not getting sucked into that D, you know, and blocking up the centre, and they're not committing a huge amount of bodies forward, okay? So they've a lot of, I think it's Carl Diamond out here, you know, they've 2 or 3 players out here, you know, that if it breaks down, that they can get the ball back in. So they're not getting ahead of the ball, okay, on that, okay? So from a St. Vincent's point of view, you know, these teams at that time were, you know, 2 of the top teams in Dublin. Like they're really, really well set up from a coaching point of view. And I think the picture really shows what good coaching looks like in relation to systems of play. Now, in the bottom right-hand corner, I'd also like you to look at this as well, okay? And this shows the connection of the system as well, okay? So obviously you can see an awful lot of bodies here, but there's bodies not involved in the play here, okay? And they're on this here, okay? So this is basically the system connection, okay? So on that day, as I said, Ballymun were playing 12 when they lost the ball back to the 45. But the other side of the pitch, okay, and you can see there the 3 red stars with the F on them, okay? They were playing a spine system that day, okay? I think it was Dean Rock, Jason Whelan, and Ted Foreman, okay? So they were the 3 forwards there, okay? So in that situation where Connolly was kicking the ball, he was blocked down. The Ballymun number 6 got the ball, and when he looked up, the connection to the system, he could see his 3 forwards in a spine, pop the ball left or right to them, okay, if that was on, okay? So there was the connection on that. And likewise, St. Vincent's, you can see the blue were playing with an extra sweeper, because obviously you're dealing with like Jason Whelan, who was on the Dublin Inter-County panel, and obviously Dean Rock, who everyone knows, and Ted Foreman, probably really one of the best club footballers a couple of years ago in Dublin, or forwards anyway. And you know, that's what, if you were going to leave them on a 3-and-3, you were going to be in a lot of trouble, okay? So St. Vincent's would have played an extra sweeper there. But it's a nice visual just to show you the connection between the 2 systems, okay? That when they turned the ball over, they had bodies up, and they had a setup up front to get the ball to. And likewise, St. Vincent's had a system to try and counteract that. Okay, this is just another one, and I just included this one. And this is from the All-Ireland final last year, when Kerry were leading 5-4 after 17 minutes. And it's an example of Kerry trying to get Dublin to kick the ball out, basically, to certain players to help Kerry's system in the match. Okay, so Kerry obviously set up like 4-4-4, so really attack-minded kind of setup. But what they were trying to do was they were trying to get Stephen Cluxton to kick the ball out short, the likes of Cooper and Fitzsimons. And then basically, so they're in defence transition as such then, and they were trying to get on them really quick and turn them over. So likes of Cooper and Fitzsimons, and they did, and the score was 5-4 after I think they got 3 points off that. So Cluxton kicked the ball to the short one, and the likes of the Dublin, the Kerry players then had their system ready and kind of smothered the player and turned them over. And you can see the score 5-4 there, okay? And you can see with the 2 black arrows where they were tempting Cluxton to kick the ball too, okay? So 17 minutes, obviously Dublin, being Dublin, okay, changed straight away, okay? And after this, and this is just a moment before this happened, from I think the 18th minute, you can see a star up on the left-hand side, and you can see Brian Fenton and Jack McCaffrey over where the star is, okay? So Dublin, seeing as regards what Kerry were doing, decided to go along with the ball. Menton broke the ball, McCaffrey got it, and the ball ended up in the back of the net. Okay, so Kerry went from 5-4 up to 1-4. Okay, and it just gives you an example of teams trying to set up a way that they can get their system in place. Now Dublin were very wise to it and onto it very, very quick, and they got huge rewards then from the kick out on that. Okay, but it's a nice visual again, and it shows that. And Kerry had two types of setups on the day for that. Obviously, the one they have there, that can only really be set up if you have a free or a 45 and it's going over and the players get a chance to set up that. In general play, you wouldn't get that set up because you wouldn't have time to set up 4-4 and 4 in the matter of 5 or 6 seconds that Stephen Cluxton kicks the ball out, okay? But for any dead balls that Kerry got that day, that's the way they were setting up until that happened, okay? And then obviously, you know, we know the result after that. But it really shows that even within systems and setups, you need, you know, adaptations all the time to what the other team is going to do. Okay, so what we're going to go on to now is the process of developing a system of play, okay? And on this, you have inputs, processes, and outcomes, okay? And we've looked at that in relation to the manager, the coaches, the players, the process, the systems, the role of the coaching, and the outcomes and performance. And what we have here is a little template that we would have come up with in relation to whether you're selecting a system of play or whether you're developing one, okay? So what we would do here is you would put your system of play in the middle. So, you know, and as I said, you could be working, you know, one of these side by side as regards with your defense and your attack, okay? So you put your system of play in the middle, your blanket defense or whatever you want to put in the middle of it, or your, you know, two-man full forward line, or your 4 forwards in the forward line, whatever you want to put into that. And then you would plan what you're going to do, okay, as regards that, okay? So plan the activities, plan the way you want to set up, okay? Then you would coach that, okay? So you would coach that, okay, to the players, okay? The performance then is obviously when it's taking place. So the training or the match, okay? So that's taking place. You observe that and you analyze it, okay? And I always like to, you know, when I'm analysing something, I'd always like to ask the players, what did you do well? Instead of coming in, you know, straight away and say, well, lads, you know, what was wrong with that? You know, because already it's kind of on a negative. So I'd always ask them, like, what did we do well there? Okay. And then I'd ask them, what did we learn from that? Okay. And then you'll probably get the, you know, what didn't go right. Okay. Instead of starting on a negative, you know, and saying, right, lads, that didn't go well, or, you know, why did that not go well? Ask them what went well in it. Okay. And then what did they learn? And you'll get the feedback from the players in relation to what's not working, because, you know, they'll understand it because they're actually playing it. Okay. So it's important that, and then you go plan again. So that's constantly going around that process of developing a system of play. So whatever system you decide to play, okay, with your team, put that in the middle. Plan what you're going to do, coach it, watch it, analyze it, and then plan again. Okay, and that's constantly going around all the time. So the next task we're going to ask you to do here, okay, I'm going to show you a video clip, and hopefully everyone can see it. Hugh will put a YouTube link into the chat box if you're having trouble seeing it, okay, but hopefully you'll be able to see it, okay. And what I'd like you to do is, okay, I want you to focus on the blanket defense of both teams, okay? So, you know, this could be done for attack play of the two teams playing here, but I don't want you to focus on that. I want you to focus on the blanket defense of both teams, okay? But whatever system of play, when you're watching a match or a video of a match, apply this as regards the template, and focus on your defense or your attack or whatever you want to focus on. But for the purpose of this, I want you to focus on the video. It's a match between Dublin and Tyrone a couple of years ago, and I want you to focus on the blanket defense of both teams. And I want you to see, was the system of play effective in this video? It's about 2.5 minutes long. And then I want you to ask or put in the chat box, why was or wasn't it effective? So give me the reason why it wasn't effective. Okay, so was our system of play effective, and why was or wasn't it effective? So going back to the model, we have our blanket defense in here. So this is what we're focusing on. We're focusing on blanket and defense here. I know you're looking at two teams. You'd only be looking at one team, obviously, with your own team. But for the purpose of it tonight, you're in the performance stage here now at the very top. Okay, so the performance is the video. Okay, you're going to observe it, and you're going to analyze as regards do well or learn. Okay, in that, okay, as regards the video that we're going to show between Tyrone and Dublin. So hopefully you can see this. Tyrone have been very
exceptionally high standard, scored some difficult conditions, and the goal was an absolute, it was the collector's item.
So, as you can see by the video, was the system of play effective for both teams? Okay, and you can see that both teams that day were very, very defensive. You can hear the commentator saying there was Dublin had 15 behind the ball, Tyrone had 14 behind the ball. So the system of play that day, from a blanket defence point of view, wasn't. Now, obviously, you know, the brilliance of Dublin that day from an attack point of view was really good. But what I'd like you to put in the chat box is, why was the systems, the two blanket defences, and more so probably Tyrone there, why were they not effective? What broke down? So if you can put whatever you seen there, or might be just 1 point, why wasn't it effective on the day? And as you as coaches, when you're watching your own teams, should be watching the videos and kind of going through it like that in relation to, you know, was it effective, and then why wasn't it? Okay.
Yeah, there's a bit of confusion among players there, Paul.
Yeah. So that could be communication issues, not knowing their roles. Maybe when you're thinking about
some of the players got in their own way, and the Tyrone players did not stick to the roles. Too many following man with the ball.
Yep.
Allowed players to cross the 40 into the scoring positions. A lack of intensity by Tyrone players, not enough pressure on the ball. 3 players swarming 1 player, left other players free.
Yep.
Movement of Dublin players was excellent.
Yep.
No pressure on the possession player inside the 45 by Tyrone defending. Poor communication, not intense enough tackling. No pressure on the ball when in the danger area. Not all Dub runners were picked up, so players got field position. too much free space given to Dublin. So that's
really good answers there. I suppose, you know, we're showing you the video to, you know, that's the way we should be thinking as coaches as regards when we're looking at how our systems are working. Like if you were looking at that from a Dublin perspective, from an attack point of view, you'd be really happy with that, okay? And you'd be just trying to bring it then to the next level or putting a few adaptations on it. But if you're looking at it from a Mickey Harte point of view there, you know, and even the Jim Gavin one from Conor Callan's tackle there, you know, you have to start looking at why it wasn't effective, and then how do we improve this through our coaching. So we have to look at, based on what you're after, you know, as coaches they're giving me back, okay, how do we improve this through our coaching? So we have to identify the issues, what we've seen in that video clip, and then bring them to the training field that it's not going to happen again. So these are just some of the ones, and some of the ones that, you know, we would have seen coming up on a lot of the workshops that we've done so far. Some of the ones that you've come up with there as well could be added to this, but just for the purpose of this, we just narrowed it down to a few. Okay, so there was 1v1 tackling issues within that. Okay, so I mentioned Conor Callan there, you know, I think Colin Kavanagh went by him very easily. So, you know, in a lot of defensive setups, 1v1 tackling, there's an issue. 2v1 tackling, 3v1 tackling, there was issues with that there was two players from Tyrone and Dublin players, and, you know, they weren't effective. They weren't smothering that player, or they weren't getting the block on. Defensive unit, so you'll see an awful lot of times here that Tyrone had a lot more numerical advantage, but they didn't use it, okay? So they weren't using their numerical advantage. And then defending the scoring zone. So that was mentioned by some of the coaches in the chat there already. So they were getting sucked out of the danger zone. Their individual positioning was poor. And I know we couldn't hear it obviously on the video, but the communication then obviously was a big issue. Okay, so some players didn't know their role. And here's a team that had played really well and really defensive prior to that match, and then were just cut asunder by themselves and by the brilliance of Dublin's attacking play. So I've also added in the bottom there attack to defence transition phase. Now we didn't see that in the video, but I think it's an important area that, you know, as coaches we really need to focus on, especially with systems, that sub phase, because we're always going from attack to defense or defense to attack. So we need to practice that, okay? And, you know, obviously we need to practice it without that first, but then we need to practice it getting into that position, because, you know, bar you're going to play permanently with X amount of bodies inside your own 45, you'll always have players coming from attack to defense and defense to attack, okay? So it needs to be worked on, okay? So coaching a system in place. So this focuses on the Torres principles, okay? How you coach and what you coach, okay? And, you know, as I said at the start, it's very important that, you know, what you coach, but more important, in my opinion, is how you coach it, okay? And how you test the players, how you tweak the activities, and how you challenge the players, okay? And everything then is obviously game-based coaching, okay? So, you know, you can have your drills or your activities, you know, to tidy up certain things, and we'll see that in a minute. But ultimately, you know, the game should be the main focus in relation to systems of play, okay? So how you coach and what you coach. So how you coach, okay, so these are the Torres principles. A lot of our coaches will be familiar with these. I think they're really applicable to systems of play, as I said, and I'm not taken from, you know, your strength and condition coach or any of them, you know, when they're out in the pitch and they're doing running activities, okay? A lot of it is, you know, theory as regards, you know, numbers and lines, but a lot of the systems of play, you really have to test and challenge, okay? You have to question the players, okay? So testing and challenging, all players should be challenged. So every player should be challenged within the systems of play. Understand the players at the center of the game. So it's very important that you understand the players at the center of the game. Resembles the game, so I spoke about that. So make sure your activities are game based, okay? So as I said to you, if you have to tweak in relation to tackling or, you know, shooting or stuff like that, that's fine, but bring it back to the game all the time. All players involved all the time. So the beauty about systems of play, you can use all the players that you have in relation to doing systems, okay? So, you know, if you have 6 players marking 6 and you have 1 or 2 left over, you can put 1 as a sweeper, 1 coming in with the ball, you know, all kinds of things like that. You can play 2 sweepers in and 3 coming in with the ball. Whatever numbers you have, you can adapt it very easy. And obviously then should always be enjoyable, developmentally appropriate and holistic GEA experience, okay? So if lads are playing games, okay, or they're playing game-based activities, okay, systems of play, they'll enjoy that, because ultimately when they go out and they play at the weekend on a Saturday or Sunday, they're going to be doing that. They're going to be playing that, okay? So you're practicing what you're going to play. But this is just something. I was at a conference about 2 years ago, and Jim Gavin spoke at it, and he referred to this Dale's cone of experience. So Dale's was a US educator, a US teacher, and it just focused on basically people generally remember 10% of what they read, 20% of what they hear, 50% of what they see, and 90% of what they do. So ultimately, coaches, you know, it's basically by doing is where they're going to learn, okay? And ultimately, if you get your players doing it on the pitch and ultimately taking control of it and coaching them themselves in the pitch of where to go and where to drop and where to, you know, where to push up into, you know, that's where the real learning is. And then you have your systems of play. But like, you know, they'll only understand as regards, you know, the cone of experience kind of shows here of, you know, 10% of what they read. So you can read stuff out to them. You can, you know, talk to them 20%, 50% of what they see, you know, if you show them clips, but basically all the learning takes place on the 90% of what they do. And that's why I'd always practice this constantly, you know, for as part of every session, working on the system of play that we're trying to implement with our team. These are some of the activities. So what would have been happening now if we were doing a workshop face to face? We would have been out into the pitch. You know, 2 tutors would have been involved with the 2 teams. We would have played, you know, one system against another, and then we would have brought in the backs and the forwards and the coaches. And we would have asked the backs with one group and with one coach or one tutor, you know, how their system was working, and we would have talked to the forwards in relation to how their system was working. And then going back to the areas that we would have seen in the Dublin Tyrone game for the purpose of this, and these were some of the issues that came up in relation to that match. We would work on them activities within the session. So the issues 1v1 defending. So there was issues of 1v1 defending in the Tyrone Dublin game. Okay, so if there's issues of 1v1 defending in your system of play, you need to practice on that. So these are just a little simple activity with a forward and a back in the middle. You have a 20-meter distance in between the 2 of them, and you have 2 poles or 2 cones at the end. You can also have 2 players or a player each at each end of the cone resting, and the 2 players forward and back in the middle working for 30 seconds. So they work for 30 seconds. Forward is trying to keep the ball off the back. They can use the cones to go around, or they can use the players at the cones on the outside. So just basically have your forward taking on your back. He gets round the back and then he goes the other way. Okay. Forward takes on back. Okay. And as I said, then he goes the other way. So very simple one that can be set up across the whole pitch, 20 meters. You can work at 20-second intervals, 30-second intervals, whatever you want to work on that. And that focuses on frontal tackling, near hand tackling, all that kind of tackling that would have been an issue in relation to 1v1 defending. So this one here is 2v1 defending. And again, you can work this across the pitch, you know, 25 meters, 30 meters. You can work this in front of the goals. So this would have been the issue where there was 2 Tyrone players on one Dublin forward, and you know they didn't block them down, or they didn't turn the ball over. So if that's an issue with your defending or your blanket defense system or whatever defense system you have, you need to work on that. Okay, and this is just a very simple one. You know, you work it could be 10 meters wide, 25 meters long, or as I said here, straight in front of the goals with the same measurements. And basically, if you're forward taking on your first back, if it looks like the forward is getting around the first back, the second back steps up and the first back wheels in. Okay, so you're doubling up there. First forward takes on the first back. If it looks like the forward is getting around the back, the second lad steps up and the first back steps in. Okay, so that can be done, I said, inside the D. It can be done in certain areas on the pitch, or it can be done across the pitch as well. Okay, with that. Okay, so you're working on your 2v1 defending and you're doubling up. Okay, so this one was working on issues defending as a unit, so using the numerical advantage. Okay, so what we've set up here, and as I said to you, if you don't have the numbers that are in this picture, you can adapt that. Okay, you don't have to have 6 back there. You can have 3 back here. Okay, just for example here, we have 6 blanket defense as I've marked them there have come back to help. So these are already in this position. Okay, so they have a numerical advantage. On the outside, then you have 4 forwards coming in. So the backs here have to work on their communication, and they have to work on the numerical advantage. So they should be turning the ball over here every time. They've got 2 extra players, okay? This other 6 backs are marking the 6 forwards that are there, okay? Also, if you're coaching on the pitch, you could have your defense coach working with the defenders here, and you could have your forwards coach or your attack coach working with your forwards, okay? So play the activity for 6 or 7 minutes, 10 minutes, pull them out, ask them the questions, ask them what way they're set up, what is it working, is it not working, and what are you learning here, okay? So you can work on that as regards numerical advantage of communication. And this is just stepping it up a little bit further. So this is the roles of the individual, and defending the scoring area, shifting across to defend. So what we've done now is we've leveled up the numbers. So again, the 6 players are already in the positions where we want them, okay, as regards to defend the D. And then we've got 6 players coming in, okay? So now roles of individuals are really, really important, and shifting across. So if the ball is coming down the right side, that everyone is looking where the ball is, looking where their position is, and they're not getting dragged out of that D area, okay? So that needs to be practiced a lot as well. As I said to you, the last 2 activities are with them set up in the area, that players know where to be standing when they get back, because there's no point in getting into the transition end of it, which we'll look at now in a second, if you don't know where to get back. And you can also use, if you're starting off with a minor team or something like that, you can also use little markers, not the hard ones, the really light ones that will knock over, they're not going to break someone's ankle, but you can put them down in the areas where you want them to defend, okay, on that. And then the last one, okay, is the transition phase one, okay? And again, there's just an example here of a setup of transition from attack to a defense. So this is the sub phase, okay? And you'll see where I've positioned the players to go as regards when we've lost the ball. So this is a kick out for the red team, okay? And you can see then where all the players are told to go from that, okay? So the ball is kicked out to number 3. 14 is trying to hold up 3. 13, 15 are dropping to that position. 11 is dropping to that position. And then you've got your 8 and your 9 and your 10 coming back to there, okay? Now, that's just an example system, okay? Obviously, if the ball was kicked out to number 2, 15 then would have to take up the role of 14, and then 14 would have to take the role up of another player, okay? So there's loads of different little components into that, okay? But you can practice that. But I think it's important as coaches that we practice that. We practice getting into the position compared to the other 2 activities which have them into the position and which have to be done. But you must practice getting your team from a kick out the opposite side or a ball turned over, getting back into the defensive setup. Because if you don't practice that, players are not going to be able to do it. And that takes an aerobic effort to get back in there if you're playing a defensive system, okay? Obviously, if you're pushing up high and the kick out comes and everyone is taking their own player, that's fine, but then you don't have cover at the back. But again, going back to the opposition, you could be playing, maybe you don't have to do that, okay? You could be playing a team that you're a lot stronger and you're going to push up on that, okay? So that's just something as regards sub-phases and transition from attack to defence. Okay, so we're nearly there. So basically, resources that can assist, okay? So these are some of the resources that I would use. So obviously, you got your Torres principles that we spoke about. So we've got the how to coach. iMovie Maker really good at taking video clips of matches, and use that a lot. Tactical iPad would be a free app. It's available on Android and it's available on iPhone. Really good. I'll show you a visual of this just on the next slide. But I think it costs about 60 euro for the year. They were given free membership there for April and May, so I'm not sure if they are for June, but you know, that's a really good one for coaches and really easy to use. And I'll just show you the screenshot of that in a second. But and obviously then we've got our template, which is really important. So your system of play in the middle: plan, coach, performance, observe, and analyze. And that's just a screenshot of what that tactical iPad does. Very easily set up. You can put up a screenshot on a message on WhatsApp, ask your players. So just for example here, 3 is the ball. Ask your players, what are we doing now? Okay, so what's 8 doing? What's 7 doing? What's 6 doing? What's 5 doing when 3 has the ball here? What's 15 doing? Are we going to pick up all our players? Are we going to let that 3 go with the ball? So we can really work on that. And it's quite easy to use. Really good tool, that tactical iPad. And it can be sent in WhatsApp and it can be sent in video. And you can play video clips. That's just a screenshot of a video clip. So that's the conclusion of the session tonight. I know we're gone a little bit over, Hugh, and there's a lot in that. I know there's a lot in that, and we've probably only touched an element of some areas, but I hope coaches will go away with an understanding of that they can go back with their own team now when they're putting a system in place and have a template to put a system in place and understand what you need to do to have a system in place, and if it's not working or it is working, how you're going to look into that and how you're going to change it with the activities.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Again, just what you're after saying is it all revolves around the coach and creating the right learning environment in your sessions, especially when you're trying to develop a system of play, that you're properly debriefing the players and sharing the experience and thought with them by asking questions and probing questions. You can use this by direct contact with them on the tactics board, videos, and it's about the old saying goes there: you play the game, you freeze the game, and you kind of fix the skill. And you make sure all the players involved have a defined playing role within that particular system that are identifying. And as coaches, again, it's not just about fixing the weaknesses in your systems of play, it's also improving the strengths as well, to make your strengths better in a particular system as well. And again, it's about, I know it takes time, but it's about repeated practice. And one of the quotes I probably would have seen today when I was looking at a thing: a system of play will honour a playing structure if you honour it with awareness. And that comes to players and coaches, that they honour that with awareness on the field, in supporting it and developing it and ensuring that try to get the best use out of a particular system to use. So I suppose without further ado, if anybody has any questions there, lads, if you put them into the chat box on Paul's presentation, and I'll feed them back to Paul there. Thanks very much.
Yeah, as I said at the start, coaches, previous to this, like a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have spent a lot of time at systems of play at all, and I would have, as I said, you left it for a few months and not even mentioned it. And then, as I said, it needs practicing all the time, as Hugh said. If you're not practicing it all the time of what you do, your players have no chance of being able to do it, and you'd be better off just playing 15 on 15, because it'll end up a disaster.
There's no questions as such coming in, Paul, but they're all, I think, just complimenting you there on your presentation there tonight, the way it was professionally done and well organised and presented. So again, I'd like to thank you for that. And I'd also like to mention that to all our coaches on the webinar tonight, that the biggest GAA coaching survey was sent out during the week and last week to all GAA clubs in the county and in the province and in Ireland, really. Just an insight into your coaching role and needs. The GAA are targeting, there Paul has it up there now, the GAA are targeting about 10,000 responses. It only takes 15 minutes to complete, lads. So if anyone's on the webinar hasn't done it, if you complete it, I've put the link up there in the webinar there for you to be able to click on that as well. But if you know anybody in your clubs, whether it's again, it's ladies football, men's football, camogie, rounders or handball, if you forward on to the link to them, and let's try and get as many coaches, male and female, in the GAA completing this GAA coach survey. Well, I think that's about it, Paul. So I don't think there's any questions there. So if you want to just. Oh, there's one question's after coming in there, Paul. In terms of building a system, do you recommend building it in blocks through strength and conditioning, or work it with most of the players involved? I can't really read that. Can you hear me, Paul?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, sorry, what did you say?
Just from Scotland there. In terms of building a system of play, do you recommend building the system in steps or blocks?
Yeah. Well, like you
or small-sided games there. You mean?
Yeah. Like, so you could work, like, for instance, like, 5v5 game. Say you're working on some sort of defensive system, you could have a 5v5 on a small pitch, and when a team gets a score, you could get the 5 players, or to sprint back into the defensive system before the other team gets the ball out, like, that kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely small-sided games, depending on your numbers as well. Loads of 6v6 and stuff like that as regards, and then bringing your extra players back. So yeah, would do it in blocks, because a lot of the time club coaches, you won't have 30 players in a training session, so you got to adapt the numbers that you have. So small-sided games, whatever system you're going to play, you can adapt that to the numbers that you have.
Paul. Here's another one there. Should a club adopt a system of play, say from under 15 up, so it's consistent?
Good question, yeah. And like, I suppose if I was up in Crossmaglen Rangers, they'd answer here, yes. Me personally, I don't know. I think you can have a style of play, but I think it's for me, it's about the players that you have. Now, the likes of Crossmaglen coach the same principles the whole way along, and they play that style, and it links into their system. So just for me, like, you could have a different variety of players if they're not coached in the right way, and you won't be able to play that system correctly. So I kind of would work the system based on the players that I have at my discretion. But as I said, yeah, if I was from Crossmaglen tonight, I'd be answering yes, you can, but for me personally, no, I just work on the players that I have.
I think that's about it. So Paul, so again, I'd like to thank you on behalf of Wicklow Coaching and Games for presenting that webinar tonight there to our coaches.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks to all the coaches for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh yeah.
Well,
so it's a long presentation, isn't it?
say, sure, it's fucking. We're now in 15 minutes.
I should be in bed.
I was going to hop in with a question there as well. Then 110, thank God.
A bit late with your questions now, Conrad.
took a while to get going, didn't they?
Cheers, they did.
Yeah.
I don't, Paul, my fucking video, my internet went for about 3 minutes in it, and then it came back.
Yeah, because you were saying I was gone, but your internet must have went.
Yeah, it came back anyway, so I hope it's still recorded when it came back.
I'd say it would, yeah.
I didn't stop it there now, so it'll probably.
It was a good.
The sound in your video stopped after about 20 seconds for me. That's the only issue I had.
Right.